Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome back to the North American Association of Cerebral Palsy Advocates Chatline. My name is Caleb Wells. I am joined by my partner in crime, Tanner Lynn. How are you today, Tanner?
Pretty good. Back in the swing.
We're back in the swing of things. We are joined again today by Brittany Smith, who is one of our board members on our board of directors for the North American Association of Cerebral Palsy Advocates. How are you today, Brittany?
I'm doing great.
It's so great to be back in the swing of this. It's been a month since we published an episode, but we're going to get back to publishing on a weekly basis and get back in rolling. Life just kind of gets in the way sometimes, but that's okay. So we're here, we're alive, we're doing things. And Brittany, you wanted to talk about a topic today, so I'm going to turn it over to you and let you do that.
Today, I wanted to talk about the importance of physical therapy and just the physical toll that it takes on our bodies. Because we use more energy to do things than normal people do. It takes longer to say get up out of the floor or get up out of your bed, for example. It just takes longer.
Or get off the floor. Sometimes I feel like that life alert lady when I fall, but that's a deep cut. That's a deep cut. So,
Me too.
yeah. I've fallen and I can't get up. Yeah, get the life alert necklace. Not a sponsor. But
No.
do they even make those anymore? Now I'm getting off topic. Do they even make those anymore?
Yes.
They
I'm not
do.
sure, honestly.
I mean, Apple Watch has a great fall detection, but I know that's not what we're here to talk about today. So, Brittany, what made you bring this topic to the table?
I had been going to physical therapy for about almost 2 months. And it wasn't until I got, I started having issues with my shoulder or just getting up and down up out of the floor. And that's when I started realizing, oh, it takes a lot of energy just to use your upper body strength versus your legs because, people with CP depend more on our not our legs, but, our arms versus our legs. No matter if you're a full-time wheelchair user or if you're, part-time wheelchair user and part-time crutches or full-time walker or crutches. It's just physically demanding.
100%. When I was growing up, they were always amazed by my arm strength. And people always want to arm wrestle me, which is not a good idea. It's not a good idea.
Nah.
I'm sure, Tanner, that you've had that experience too. They're like, you have nothing in your legs. Let's see how strong your arms are, right?
Yep. Exactly.
And when it comes to therapy and stuff like that, like you were saying, Brittany, yeah, it takes a lot. And one of the main points of physical therapy as a form of therapy for people with cerebral palsy is to build up strength, right? It's a way for us to get that physical exercise, build up that strength. And I'm not going to say the 3 dirty letters. If longtime listeners of the podcast know what those are, if you have a question about the 3 dirty letters, let us know. But the whole point is use what you have and build up what you have. Because once you lose it, you're not going to have it back. So it's important to kind of get ahead of that in a way and build up that strength. I'm not a therapist. I'll fully admit that. My background, of course, is different than in therapy, but I've been in therapy pretty much my entire life. And you learn those things. And sometimes if you don't go to therapy, you can build some really bad habits. So I'm going to throw that to both of you and just kind of let you guys run with it. So who wants to take that?
Well, if you don't go to therapy, I know for me, if I don't go to therapy, I lose the ability to do things, like the ability um to sit myself up gets harder and harder. The ability to just move my body gets harder and harder. So I feel like we need access to physical therapy and to good therapists who know what they're doing. I have a great one, and it sounds like Brittany has a great one too. So
Yeah.
That's also an interesting point as well, because there's a lot of, again, we'll go back to what we talked about. I think it was in episode 7, Tanner, about that there's a lot of research and a lot of focus on cerebral palsy in the pediatric space. And if it's a lot of focus on making sure that the kids have what they need, right?
yeah,
But once you turn 18, you age out of those pediatric facilities, 18 or 21, whatever it may be. So it's hard when we get to that stage in our life, when we've had that consistency. Most of us who have been seeing the same therapist since we were 6 months old, that person is no longer there because they can't be, because they're based in pediatrics. Sometimes you get lucky. Like I got lucky with my therapist that she worked with me until I was about 23. But
yeah. I mean, and there can be good therapists and therapists who have never seen CP before, and so it takes time to build up that expertise, if you will, of how do I manage this person with CP, because it's not just a cakewalk. It's not like a person who broke their shoulder or broke their arm. It's all facets of, well, you need to stand today. You need to stretch my hip out today. You need to do this and that. It's all connected, all at once. And I feel like it's very important that you have those resources available to you to get that need met. So,
100%, 100%. So I go back and I think about what my therapist always used to tell me, which is you're an expert on your body. And what I think is important and what we need to talk about in a space like this, in a space like the association, is it is important for you to be your best advocate. And I know we've reeled that point home on multiple episodes, but again, it's going to rear its head and we're going to talk about it here, because if you're 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 years old and you can say, this is what I feel like I need, this is how I'm feeling, and you have a therapist that will be able to listen to those concerns and those needs, it's going to change your life. So I urge a lot of our listeners, and if we have listeners who have children with cerebral palsy, have those conversations with your kids about, okay, how are you feeling? Like, how will you be able to tell your therapist how you're feeling? And how can we fix that problem? Because Tanner is 100% right. It affects every facet of our lives. It's not just, okay, we're going to get up and we're going to stand today, or we're rehabbing a shoulder, so this is what we have to do. It's, we are in therapy building up that strength and learning to adapt. And that's the conversation that we need to have, and it needs to be an open dialogue between the therapist and the client.
yeah.
And the younger that you can start doing that, and the younger you can start advocating for yourself, the better positioned you will be once you transition out of that pediatric space into a space where you are dealing with adult therapists who that's what they do. They do a lot of sports rehab, they do a lot of injury rehab, and they do a lot of hip replacements. And being able to share those experiences, although they're different than having necessarily a hip replacement, we can say, well, this is how I'm feeling, and they can draw on their experience of their field to see how they can help.
Exactly.
So
And I feel like it takes a good number of I've seen the same therapist for since 2015, and him and I have gotten to the point where we're just like, okay, this is what we're doing today. But it took several years to get to that point, because it wasn't. He had never seen somebody with CP before, so that was a whole new learning curve for him alone, and so I'm sure Brittany has some of the same feeling about that.
yeah,
Like I have the same like physical therapist from like preschool all the way through high school. And once I finished high school, I didn't go back to physical therapy for 9 years actually. You know,
Yeah,
I didn't want to go back to physical therapy just for like some personal reasons. And I told my mom, I said, I don't want to go back to physical therapy. And I didn't. I waited 9 years and I, I went back to physical therapy on last month. Um, and I was dreading the experience because of certain things that's happened. And you know, I met my physical therapist and I didn't know who my physical therapist was going to be. I had had a consultation previously the other day, and I got put with my physical therapist, and he's like, "Well, I have X amount of experience with people with cerebral palsy, and I actually see two other patients that actually have CP." So I was automatically put at ease because he knows what he's doing and he has experience. That automatically put my mind at ease because honestly, it terrifies me if somebody doesn't know what CP is. You know,
100. Yeah, exactly. So exactly, and you can continue. I just you hit the nail on the head with I think what we're trying to get across here, right? And in terms
yeah,
of having fatigue with that, because and having fatigue with PT in general,
mm,
growing up from the time I was 6 months old until I was 18, I was in PT 2-3 times a week.
yep.
And so,
mm,
that's where I met most of my friends, and that's where a lot of my formative experiences came from, not necessarily the traditional classroom or the traditional system, right? So,
yeah,
and that can be isolating. And then when you turn 18 and they're like, okay, we can't see you anymore because you've aged out of the program, you're like, well, great. Now I don't have to do PT anymore. I can go out and live my life. And you kind
yeah,
of, and then you'll eventually hit that point where, oh, maybe physical therapy isn't a bad idea.
Yeah,
yeah. I was getting to a point where I was starting to get weak, and so therefore it certain things that was become what used to be easy was getting tougher. And at my age, I'm you know you don't realize how important like stretching and like doing certain exercises helps the spasticity in general, even though your body tries to reject it when you do exercise. that you know the importance of trying to keep yourself limber enough to where you don't feel like a 2x4, you know.
I mm, I get that, and I know Tanner gets that. So
Yep.
wait,
I think that is a good time to stop and think of great partners.
our great partners at Giraffe Bottle, friends. School time is just around the corner. Go back to school in style with the Giraffe Bottle hands-free hydration system. The Giraffe Bottle Tower Bundle starting at $57 on their website, which is giraffebottle.com. That's giraffe, like the animal bottle.com. And as always, that includes the 24-ounce Giraffe bottle with a stainless steel mount and a 15-inch neck straw. The Giraffe Bottle hands-free hydration system is designed to be flexible and easy to use for people of all abilities. Giraffe Bottle is a great solution for wheelchairs, walkers, desks, beds, tables, and more. Go back to school without the fear of dehydration with the Giraffe Bottle. If you order by September 1st, get free shipping on orders over $75 at giraffebottle.com. Once again, that is giraffe, like the animal bottle.com. Thank you to Giraffe Bottle for sponsoring the Chatline. They are great people over there, a great Midwest company out of Illinois, and we thank them so much for being able to go on this journey with us and give us that support that we need. And we can get back into this conversation. And as we dovetail that, we're going to talk about support, because your physical therapist can also become more than that too. Your physical therapist can become your mental health counselors, because you see them more than anybody in your life as a kid growing up. If you're going 2-3 times a week, it becomes your
Yeah.
second home. It does.
Yeah.
So that's something that you have to understand too. And that's why, like Tanner said, building up that rapport, building up that relationship goes so much deeper than just you're here to help me get physically stronger, right?
Yeah.
So Tanner, you can run with that.
Well, I know that like since I've known my physical therapist, um, he's not just my therapist. He's like one of my friends. We've been out to dinner together, and I've been to his house with his family, and I've been on his boat. So I mean, it's a whole. When you build that relationship, you kind of they kind of understand who you are as a person too, and so that definitely has helped me over the years.
100%. And your therapist is Midwest rich. He has a lake boat.
No,
That's just probably my Missouri brain coming out. Anytime anybody said they had a boat, I'm like, oh, you have money. Like, probably not the case, but you are right. And my therapist that I had, she was wonderful. Shout out to Miriam. I know that you listen. But she was great. We would get in like verbal arguments a lot. Like, I was, believe this or not, I was a very defiant child. Very questioning the system, right? So it got to a point where we would have these conversations, because I you don't really understand what they're doing for you when you're that age, when you're 10, 11, 12 years old. You're like, why the hell am I still here? But it really does help to have those kind of relationships and getting to know your therapist outside of just that clinical setting. And I know those are two examples that are they're fringe examples, right? Because not every therapist is going to take the time to do that.
Yeah.
But it really does kind of change your perspective.
yeah, on the
It,
yeah.
So, and that's just kind of it. Brittany, how is therapy going for you, though?
It has been going great. It's better than what I it's better than what I thought it would be. Um, I actually I had went a couple weeks ago, and I went in the office, and I'm like, hey, I'm not feeling good, and I said I'm not doing good today at all. And I was doing my exercises, and he said I can just tell that your body gets tired. And he said, take as much time as you need. And one thing that really stuck out to me was that day that I was just exhausted. I didn't even want to get out of bed to go to therapy. And as soon as I got done, he said, you did a great job today, which that kind of meant the world to me that, your therapist says that to you, especially when they know that you're like physically exhausted, but you still go in and give your 110% of what needs to get done, but yet they still, they're an encouragement to you at the same time.
Well, you're right. You're right. And it comes down to that. And it comes down to like knowing that you're doing the right things. Uh, we get so caught up in all this junk that's in our head, and a lot of the questions come back to a couple things, and one of them is the why me question, which I think, Tanner, we should sit down and have a conversation with you when we record next week about that stuff, because I think that that's how that breaks down is when you're a kid or even as an adult, you ask the question of why me? Why am I in this situation? And there's a couple answers there that we can sit down and have. So we can break that down in a later episode, and that's a 25-minute conversation. But the one that I wanted to bring up here is we sit down and we honestly think that all this mess is like, is it worth it? And when you have somebody in your corner to say, you did a great job and this is worth it, it doesn't matter what facet of your life you're talking about. That's a great thing. So,
One of the things that really caught my attention, I was actually speaking to my physical therapist one day during one of my sessions, and he was like, I was telling him stuff that I was struggling with, like physically, and he looked me straight in the face and he's like, I will help you, you know, I will help you. And that to me, that's a plus when a physical therapist actually takes the time to listen to your concerns and to be like, okay, let's sit down and try to fix this. Or or if you say like I'm having trouble with my hips, and your therapist will actually just like massage your hips to the point where you can actually feel better and you can actually move. It's
Yeah.
just those types of therapists that actually take the time to actually help you instead of like these physical therapists. It's like, let's do this, this, and this. You're done, leave. You know,
Exactly.
it's those physical therapists that actually take the time to listen to the patient.
Caleb,
exactly.
I think that is a good stopping point for this.
Yeah.
So,
I was just about to wrap it up with this quote from the German poet Charles Bukowski, who says, I am a series of small victories and large defeats. And I think that pretty much sums it up, is that you really have to take the small victories and deal with the larger defeats throughout life. So I think that's a good place to stop. And this is when Tanner gets to tell you about where you can find us and how you can join us each week.
You can find us on, you can find the audio version on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Amazon Music, and any other place you find your podcast. If you enjoy this content that we produce every week, be sure and leave us a review. That does help the algorithm to get our content pushed further up in the podcast directory so that more and more people hear this great show. So,
We still don't know on the business side how that works, but just leave us a nice review. That's great. On YouTube, if you're on YouTube, don't forget to ring the bell to be notified when we post new content. And there's a back catalog of all of our episodes there on the playlist. So thank you again for joining us wherever you may be, however you may be joining us. Thank you for making us part of your week. And we will see you next week. Thank you guys for coming on and joining me today just for this nice conversation, because I think it was one that we needed to have.
thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.